Hello, this is Brian Daitzman. I'm the editor-in-chief of The Intellectualist and History of Hosts of the Present, co-produced with Lincoln Square. Today on History of the Present, we're going to be looking through major inflection points shaping the world right now, whether it's democracy, technology, climate change, inequality. All these different things are coming to inflection points today. Today, we have the honor of speaking with Professor Arthur Caplan. Professor Caplan is the Dr. William F. and Virginia Connolly Mitty Professor of Bioethics at the Department of Population Health at NYU Grossman School of Medicine. Professor Caplan is the founding head of NYU Grossman's Division of Medical Ethics. Professor Caplan, thank you for being here today. We're honored to have you. I want to start with some of your recent writing, if we can. We can jump right into this. You've been writing about MAHA, Make America Healthy Again. You've been writing about autism, vaccines, public health, the Epstein scandal, and the wellness culture. Let's start with a very simple question, Professor. When you look at American public health right now, what worries you the most?
Well, thanks for having me. Boy, I don't know if I can make a list of what worries me the most. It's a mess. I think, first of all, it's been downsized to the point of ineffectiveness. We just looked at the firings, the staff let go. The federal public health effort has been disemboweled. I don't know, no other way to put it. It's basically been hacked to death. You know, we have an Ebola outbreak, and one of the things that Health and Human Services did was it asked for volunteers to go to the airport to monitor people coming in for Ebola. Are you kidding me? Volunteers?
Yeah.
Secondly, you've got research cuts across the board in public health that are just devastating, giving up on mRNA vaccines, which helped us get through COVID, but are super promising for other public health challenges. By the way, including things like venereal diseases, cancers, that sort of thing. Another worrisome thing on the public health front is that we are wiping out and cleansing studies that ideologically MAHA doesn't like and the administration doesn't like. That ranges from we're going to scrub off all talk of diversity, equity, and inclusiveness, which I thought were pretty good values and might want to stand up for those. It's kind of hard to be anti-inclusiveness, but nonetheless, there we are. And we're also seeing papers dropped, other studies. There have been studies that show COVID vaccine was safe for kids, even though it was alleged that they weren't. They got basically censored. So you have a situation where American public health, which used to be the world leader, is being dismantled, censored, subjected to ideological oversight. Not good.
Well, Professor, in some of your writing that I reviewed in preparation for this interview, basically the suggestion is that Make America Healthy Again, if people don't realize, MAHA, Make America Healthy Again, RFK Jr., this is really his project. And some of the broad contours of these policies are anti-vaccine and so-called wellness. And I think you argue pretty effectively that this is eugenics. This is eugenics dressed up with modern form. Can you speak to that, Professor?
Well, sadly, there is a strain in the both MAHA and MAGA movement that sees, let's call it racial diversity, as a threat to the health of America. And that is a very old eugenics idea, one, by the way, that the Nazis, and I'm using that metaphor intentionally for all of you who blanch at analogies to the Nazis. I'm a student of German medicine and science. I know very well what I'm saying here. If you blame immigrants for diseases, if you talk about shithole countries, if you blame if you will, diversity for lowering the IQ of this country, if you worry on and on about fertility, which Kennedy, Oz, and other leaders do, what they mean is white fertility. They're not talking about number of babies born. If they wanted babies, there are plenty of them that they'd managed to lock up in detention facilities. So they want the right kind, quote unquote, of babies. In addition to that sort of eugenics, they're sounding all kinds of dog whistles. I'll give you a simple one that I know drives some of my MAGA and MAHA critics nuts, but the obsession with things like whole milk.
Yeah.
That is an old saw of Nazi medicine. The Germans were obsessed with, if you will, whole milk. They felt that that was purity. I even think they delighted in the whiteness of it. And they felt that raw whole milk was the thing to drink. And here we are with RFK Jr. telling people and standing up and drinking unpasteurized milk, which we know basically since Pasteur, that's at least 125 years, you don't drink milk from cows that are wallowing around in filth. You have to clean it up. And you're going to get people sick that way. But this food obsession, natural foods, whole milk, raw milk, this sort of thing, that also has a long, strong eugenic history. By the way, another huge proponent of this diet, including raw whole milk, Mussolini. Even before Hitler, he was touting this in the 30s as something that Italians ought to be doing. So, no data, no evidence, just kind of this, I don't know what to call it, ideological purity idea that has swept into a lot of the MAHA recommendations. And while I'm at it, let me say one other thing. If I was going to pick somebody whose advice I would follow out of, I don't know, 300 and some million Americans about how to be healthy, I think RFK Jr. might qualify as my 300 millionth advisor.
So he would be at the bottom of that list.
Yes, he would be at the absolute bottom. Anti-vaccine, drinks raw milk, advances taking steroids, which he does. He's clearly going to suntan parlors all the time. He put on these performative push-up exhibits and pull-up exhibits. And guess what? We don't see that anymore because he tore his rotator cuff and wrecked himself doing these ridiculous, I don't know what to call them, feats of strength. I'm tempted to invoke Seinfeld here. He is a guy who is just anti-science all the way, doesn't root his advice in any set. Last thing I've seen him doing lately is catching rattlesnakes by hand. I'm pretty sure this is meant to show us he's a tough guy.
Yeah.
But what it shows to me is he's a stupid guy. He doesn't have to be doing this. What is the point of this?
Yeah.
So
I mean, how many HHA secretaries do you know, Professor Caplan, that could pick up a rattlesnake with one hand, right?
Well, none, but I will add, I don't care.
Right.
I'd like to see him pick up, let's say, a vial of HPV vaccine and tell people to take it so we could get rid of cervical cancer.
Right. Well, Professor, why do you think the Trump administration, I know we sort of touched on this a little with the racial parts, but getting really, let's go kind of deeper into this with the anti-vaccination. We know that we know this scientifically, we know that vaccine prevents severe injury and death in people who are vaccinated. Why do you think, and I mean this, why is the Trump administration against something that will save the lives of children, American people all over the world? Why are they against this? This doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, and remember, just to add to that, it doesn't make any sense, the greatest advancer of vaccines in the past decade is Donald Trump. He pushed forward COVID vaccine.
Right.
He came up with the warp speed idea to throw as much government money as needed, paying the private sector any crazy amount to get a vaccine for COVID rapidly. He seems to have forgotten this, and his followers seem to not want to remember it, but we might say he is the father of the COVID vaccine that is so disliked by his followers. It used to be, even pre-Trump, the old anti-vaccine movement, which was fringy, but not nothing. It had a voice. It was trying to undercut vaccines. Kennedy had a role in that. and
He has a financial incentive too. He's making money off this, right?
well, he makes money in two ways. He sells alternative medicines
Yeah,
for preventing infectious disease.
which have no medical
No,
scientific provenance.
no. The number one outstanding one is ivermectin, which is pretty good at killing worms, as dog owners know. That's the standard medicine for deworming,
Yeah,
but it doesn't do much for a virus. And there's no evidence whatsoever that it can. But there are many of these cuckoo remedies that he touts. And then back in the day, they used to try and say they were afraid that vaccines were dangerous, and the number one danger was autism. So there was always linking the expanding numbers of kids diagnosed with autism to vaccination. And it was a fear of them not being safe that led people in the anti-vaccine movement to oppose. What's happened is we got plenty of data that shows that there's no link between autism and vaccines.
yeah.
None. I mean, none. We're starting to diagnose.
This is an ugly lie. It's an ugly lie.
Ugly lie. Best evidence for that, some pediatricians are starting to be able to diagnose a child who's going to be autistic before they get shots. That is either by genetics or by a good clinical exam. So,
if I may, Professor Caplan, too, I mean, isn't part of the reason why in the population, doctors are basically able to diagnose more people on the spectrum because there's more knowledge about it, and there's more medical science about it, and there's more understanding. And
I'll add something else. There's money to be made. The number of autism treatment clinics, however weird they are, has gone from a handful to thousands. Medicaid, the program for poor kids, is spending huge sums of money on what I'm not sure is effective interventions for autism. But there's money out there to be made from it, the treatment of autism, and some of the stigma has been taken away. So people might say, oh, I'm autistic, but I'm a high-end performer. I'm Elon Musk or Bill Gates. Not everybody with autism is in an institution unable to care for themselves. So when you see that, there are people more willing to carry a diagnosis of autism than they might have fought it or disagreed with it, but no more. There's even some advantages. You may get extra time on tests, for example, in school. So I don't think we've had an epidemic of autism. I think what we've got is an epidemic of diagnosing autism. A different problem. Anyway, the safety argument fell apart, but something else took its place, and it's right in my area: bad ethics. And what I mean by that is, if you're going to have a public health approach to infectious disease, Ebola, measles, COVID, whatever it's going to be, you need to have a duty, an obligation to take care of your neighbor.
Yeah.
The only way vaccines work is to administer them to a group or a community. They don't, I mean, it's nice if you get vaccinated, that helps you not get sick, but vaccines are at most 95% effective. So there's always somebody out there who's best protected by you getting vaccinated so you don't give the disease to them. And there are other people who just can't get vaccinated. They're too old, their immune system's not working. Newborns don't have much of an immune system. So you have to care about your neighbor. And what's happened in, I'm going to say, MAGA, is the rise of selfish, egotistical egoism, meaning I only care about me. I'm not doing anything to help my neighbor. I don't care about my neighbor.
Yeah.
It's as if Ayn Rand became the American philosophy teacher somehow. Ayn Rand, with her fountainhead and rugged individualism, you can see it in Musk and his libertarianism, and a lot of the tech bros espouse
And
this.
you really can't run a country of 350 million people based on rustic individualism, can you?
Well, as I didn't think he'd make it into our discussion, but as Thomas Hobbes said, no, you'll get a life that's nasty, brutish, and short.
Right.
It doesn't work that way. So if we don't care about one another, then I guess we were able to drive at any speed we want, drunk or not. I guess we can not worry about putting our little kids in car seats. Why would I be burdened with
Yeah.
that kind of a obligation? And it goes on and on and on and on. I can litter. I can do anything I like because it's my freedom. That philosophy is what happened post COVID. The
Mhm.
anti vaccine movement moved from safety to liberty.
And sort of, we talk a lot about, we're talking about COVID, we're talking about mRNA technology. Professor Caplan, one of RFK Jr.'s main policies was to destroy mRNA technology in the United States. Can you speak to the promise of mRNA technology as it relates, for instance, to cancers, to cures?
So, look, the old style vaccine relied on taking a virus like measles or diphtheria, trying to make it weaker to the point where it would still elicit an immune response, but not give you the disease. That's
Yep.
the basic idea. It's still got a problem because sometimes some batch doesn't get weak enough and you could get the disease. Occasionally, polio vaccination does give somebody a case of polio. It's pretty rare. It's in the 1 in a million kind of category, but could happen. mRNA says we're going to use genetic tricks. We're going to get the viruses that attack us, infectious disease viruses like measles, and fool our immune system into going after these viruses by, if you will, tuning up their natural reactivity. But there's no dead virus. It's much safer. It's much easier to make. Those of you listening don't know this. To grow the viruses that go into our shots, you grow them on chicken eggs.
Yeah.
One of the reasons there's vaccine shortages is you don't get enough eggs in a given year.
Right.
Or if you're waiting to do something about COVID, you're waiting for the chickens to lay eggs so you can grow virus. The viruses have to grow on something, and turns out that eggs are the best medium. By the way, that's why we exempted some people from vaccines like flu shots who had egg allergy. That's
Okay.
the only health thing that I can really think of that was serious. But to come all the way around. So mRNA is in our body all the time. It is the translator of information from our DNA into the proteins and chemicals that make our traits. It's what does that. It's a super fantastic tool. Not only is it good for infectious disease, there are vaccines out there right now that seem to be working for melanoma, a
Yeah.
major killer. Pancreatic cancer, you know what we have to treat that right now? Nothing. Looks like you can go after the molecules that are hard to reach using chemotherapy, but the mRNA vaccines altering the viruses to kill those cells that are growing out of control seem to be working, and on it goes. So to disarm us in the war on
Unilaterally
cancer,
disarm us.
unilaterally disarm us is crazy. By the way, there's at least one state, Idaho, that has banned mRNA vaccines. I'm waiting to see how that's going to sort out when the cancer vaccines start really showing up, I'm going to say next year. And there are a number of legislators at the state level who keep saying they want to ban any exposure to mRNA, which would
Mhm.
be hard to do since it runs our bodies.
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to be able to ban it.
Professor Kaplan, you make you make a number of really interesting points that, tying together. Part of the challenge, it seems like, at least in public health, is that ignorance, particularly in public policy, is a virtue today.
Ignorance helps. And by the way, a lot of the leaders of public health, federal public health, and some states, Florida, Texas, they're not doctors. They're not public health people. They're lawyers or political appointees.
Yeah.
That tells us something is very wrong as well. You don't, I mean, all right, maybe you have a few people administratively running different parts of these enormous agencies, but to replace all the scientists and doctors with non-scientists and doctors makes no sense.
Can you tell, we have a general audience. They're interested in understanding how all of these moving pieces interact. Recently, we wrote an article about something like 10,000 scientists have left the federal government in the last year.
Right.
How does that affect our standard of living in the United States?
So people forget this. you say to them, well, 10,000 scientists have dropped out, and I can tell you that many, many young people are not going into a science career. They're saying, I don't need that aggravation. There are not many grants. I don't want some bureaucrat or apparatchik looking over my shoulder, telling me what I can say and I can't say. So, what does that mean? Well, it means fewer cures, fewer breakthroughs, mRNA technology directly out of NIH funding in the US. I happen to have gone to school with the guy who invented mRNA vaccine,
Right.
a little bit of a friend of mine, Drew Weitzman. He got funded, by your taxpayer money. Take it away, no mRNA vaccines. But more to the point, jobs disappear. And
Yeah.
it's not just the science jobs, it's the jobs of supplying all the equipment to the lab, it's the jobs of the conferences and meetings that scientists hold to exchange ideas. It's the jobs of delivering all the, if you will, supplies and commodities that go into a giant lab. If you go after science, I'm going to give you some cities: Pittsburgh,
Yeah.
Austin, Gainesville, and some in red states. These are cities that run on science. And I
In
don't
North
just mean the
Carolina, for
science
instance, there's
jobs.
the Research Triangle.
Research Triangle Park,
Yeah.
Boston. I mean, it goes, we have a deep commitment, not just in the life sciences, but in AI and computer science too. But you hack up science and destroy those jobs, you're going to set back the economy, not just your health.
And let's get to that though, because you're basically saying that now. Basically, how I'm taking what you're saying is that essentially they're saying, oh, we save $500 million by cutting this, and they're selling this, but they're not also saying what that $500 million, let's say,
Right.
investment over 25 years, in terms
Right.
of human life, in terms of economic, like you said, someone, the person behind the technology of mRNA. How many jobs did that create downstream over 25 years, right? How many lives?
Exactly. I'm sure that the multiplier is at least 4 or 5 times what your
Yeah.
investment is in creating new jobs and creating supporting jobs. I'll give you a sector that is impacted that people don't even think about. It's high schools. They're committed to teaching science. We keep telling kids, the future is STEM:
Yeah.
science, technology, engineering, mathematics. Well, if you cut it, it ain't the future. So here's a question for those of you thinking about Choate or some other fancy private school. Why would I send my kid there if there's no future in the science technology career that I'm supposed to be spending 60 grand a year for you to, get into a school that will teach you this stuff?
Professor Caplan, so you're a professor at New York University. I had the honor of attending NYU. So it's great to see you, and it has a huge international student body. How has these attacks on? I've seen it anecdotally. All right, where you have PhDs, young PhDs, are in the U.S. They came to the U.S. to study, to NYU, any of these sort of top universities, and now they're not getting funding. They're going home. What is that going to do to our future?
Well, it puts some of these countries like China at a distinct advantage competing with us over all manner of technology. So they take the jobs, they do the patenting, we buy the drugs from them down the road, and the vaccines and the medical devices. Secondly, about 40% of papers in the life sciences have one joint author from another country. Well, if they disappear, you can predict a slowing down of that. One other reality: those kids are not coming here to study, partly because they're a little nervous that Trump is going to lock them up or ICE will deport them or whatever. There's racism
Yeah.
in the federal government. They don't want to deal with it, so they're going elsewhere. They go to Canada, they go to Britain.
Why deal with the headache?
I wouldn't. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, I don't need this. If you're going to cut and ruin your own science establishment, and then you're going to make it miserable for me to go there, I don't think that's a great recruitment package.
What happens, Professor Caplan? So much of American promise, I want to argue, is tied to science and scientific development of the last 100 years. What happens to a country based on scientific progress that gives up science?
Well, sadly, it slips away in terms of quality of life.
Mhm.
It slips away also in terms of foreign influence. I mean, part of the reason people want to be our friend is that we have technology or we have medicines that they want, be it Africa
That could
or
save
partnering
people's lives and
that
make
can
things
save
better.
people's lives.
Yep.
So they want alliances, whether it's Israel or Japan or Korea or Saudi Arabia, which is trying to upgrade its science and technology to replace its reliance on the oil sector.
Mm.
So it is really, it's just a ridiculously stupid foreign
Yeah.
policy to
Yeah.
chop back on the thing that you lead in. And by the way, that you can also show demonstrable results. I mean, it's not like we're asking people to support a theoretical idea of funding science in America. Across the board, the biggest money makers we've got, cancer in medicine, treating it. You got all sorts of diagnostic technology. Our weapons depend on science for them to be effective. It goes on and on. The whole science sector basically drives American preeminence.
Professor, you wrote about in preparing for this interview. I was reading some of your writing, and you talk about the challenge, particularly at elite institutions. You wrote about I want to say Jeffrey Epstein as it relates to academia. What is, if you can, Professor Caplan, discuss what, I don't know if people understand the links that we're talking about Jeffrey Epstein, the convicted sex offender who died by suicide in 2019 and is tied to President Donald Trump. Can you speak to the ties between Jeffrey Epstein and elite academia and why you chose to write about this?
Well, I know people are aware that Epstein's crimes involve children, and that certainly is the centerpiece of his immoral, illegal conduct, for which he and his associates should be held accountable even after death,
Hmm.
in terms of his estate, his reputation, and so on. But Epstein, it's not getting the same attention, was in love with American academics. He
Yeah.
loved the university. You know, he tried to be a math teacher at the fancy school in New York called Dalton,
Oh yeah.
washed out, but he attempted it. Um, and he spent his somewhat sleazy career in the investment firms, making money, ultimately using it to buy favor from Harvard,
Yeah.
Bard, many, many institutions. He wanted academics to like him. He wanted their respect in terms of his ideas. And I don't think
There was a
Mr.
cachet, right? There was a
Jay with a
cachet.
cachet kept him a little bit reputable, by the way,
Yep.
while he was
Yep.
mauling the youth. He was
Yeah.
supporting different science projects. And if people don't understand this, I think universities have been naive because what they do is they say to the faculty, cultivate relationships with the rich people, figure
Right.
out whether they'll donate to your project. And if they
Mhm.
will, then great, come tell the development office and we'll lock down the gift.
Yeah.
But they're not vetting people. They're not helping anybody say, I don't know, Jeffrey Epstein, isn't he convicted at this point of a
Because
sex
this
crime?
was after he was a sex offender. This was
Yes,
after he was
yes.
yeah,
And still, he was showing up at seminars and
being feted.
funding programs at different schools, Case Western, and all these other places. Um, I think the American university, sorry, has prostituted itself too much to
Mhm.
rich donors, and it needs more oversight of how those relationships work.
Professor Caplan, you know what you just said raises a very interesting point, and it gets to funding of universities. What's going to happen to universities, particularly as the Trump administration is cracking down on the funding of universities? There's
Mm.
also there are less children today. What's going to happen? So you're going to have some schools with major endowments that might be okay. I'm hearing about major universities that are in serious trouble today because of population, also this administration. Professor Caplan, can you speak to that at all in terms of how is American academia really that's helped given rise to middle class, professional class, all these things? How does it continue operating on the same economic model that's been going, right?
Well, federal funding has been crucial to the rise and prestige of, if you will, major research universities. The
Mhm.
Harvards, the Stanfords, the NYUs, the Penns, the Dukes, these places are reliant on federal money to keep them going. And I don't just mean in medicine, I mean across the board, grants from the National Science Foundation into chemistry or physics, as well as obviously AI and computational biology. I'd say their reliance may get up in some schools to 50%. You take that out,
You're gonna have real
you are
problems.
going to see shrinking
Yeah.
universities.
Mhm.
Second, some places are just flat out in trouble. Tuition is too high. They can't run their places just on tuition. They need grants. They need gifts. There's no more room, I don't think, for most schools to raise their tuition anymore.
Yeah.
People are just going to say, I'm not going to pay that. I'll go learn I'll learn a craft, I'll do something else, but I'm not going to spend $100,000 a year and go into debt to go to NYU or
Yeah.
wherever it's going to be. So many schools, I think we're going to see closures. The sort of liberal arts schools that are right on the edge with small enrollments, they can't keep
We're gonna have a hard
raising.
time.
Yeah. The other thing I think our academia is in danger, is in trouble, is that more and more people go to school and they start to say, I want a job when I get out of here.
Right.
And I understand that. And people have a legitimate expectation that they want to get a job. But I don't see universities just as a place to learn a skill or a craft. I think you also want to learn to be a good citizen. You
Mm.
want to learn about your history if it's not scrubbed by the government. You want to learn about even ways to enjoy yourself, art, literature, so that in your free time or retirement, you can have a good quality of life that way. You may even in college pick up a sport of some kind. I don't mean being a fancy paid athlete. I just mean in a club or something.
Intramural or
Yeah, intramurals, you learn chess. I don't know, something
yeah.
that hobbies that you enjoy. You'll learn backgammon, whatever it is. So I oppose this idea fiercely that we only go to school so that we can get a job when we come out of there. I think what we want is good citizens to come out of there. We want tools that people can use to have a enjoyable life, and we want a job. That's a tough mission. It's across the board. Somebody said to me, "Well, given these prices, why don't I just go and become a plumber?" My counter argument is you should be an educated plumber. There's no reason that you can't follow a 4 year university course with a plumbing career if that's what you want to do. I'm not against plumbers. God only knows I use them and I know what they charge. But, uh, let's have a serious discussion here about what kind of citizens do we want. Similarly, if you don't teach any science of any usefulness in high school and junior high school, then you get a scientifically illiterate society, and we're starting to see the consequences of that. There isn't enough sort of useful science taught. It's nice to learn calculus. I
Mhm.
don't think that's what I'd be teaching. I think I might be teaching about climate and the environment and maybe how do computers work and that sort of science so that I could have citizens who could be effective in terms of their political choices about where the science goes.
Do you see do you, in do you see an opportunity for America. So this is going to come down to American voters, Professor Caplan. I think we agree with that. That they're just going to have to make better choices. Do you foresee, given the obvious, we're talking about obvious damage to the United States, do you have optimism, Professor, that Americans are going to choose policymakers in the future that will respect science, that won't lead to unnecessary suffering? So much of what we've experienced, particularly since COVID, has just been unnecessary preventable suffering being weaponized really by the federal government, the people that are there to protect us from this. Can you speak to that? Do you have optimism, or maybe a guarded optimism, about 2026? Because this is also we also talk about politics and inequality and democracy, because this is all tied together. Do you have a sense that Americans are kind of tired of what's happening now?
Well, look, I think COVID is to blame for the loss of faith in science and medicine. We still had many millions of deaths, even though they arrived at a vaccine pretty quick.
Yep.
And then there were still people getting sick and dying after the vaccine. And I think Americans said, I thought we had the best healthcare and science in the world. Meanwhile, I have no job. You're locking me up in my house. My kid can't go to school. I can't go to a restaurant. I can't go to the movies. The whole downtown in the city I live in is shut down, and the little shops and stores are closed. I don't like this. And I think we're watching that play out in this backlash. So as that recedes into the rearview mirror, I'm somewhat optimistic that we'll regain our senses and say, look, the best tools we have to fight pandemics, the best tools we have to fight the diseases that ravage us and our kids are medicine and science. And the best way actually to advance the quality of our lives is to have better pain medicines, better mental health interventions, these sorts of things. So I am optimistic. Now, if you said to me, how long? Well, not by 2026. I think we'll see some slowing down of the Trump agenda that way. And I do think we're going to see Congress, at least the House, change hands.
Yeah.
And that will slow this sort of chipping away at science and medicine somewhat. But I'll put this to you, Brian. How long do you think it'll take to reverse the architectural damage that Trump has done in Washington, D.C.? I'm talking the reflecting pool and getting his name off the Kennedy Center and the ballroom and the world martial arts, whatever they call themselves, fights that he's setting up on the front lawn, and on and on. They're wiping out the portrait gallery. I think it's going to take many years to get that stuff back, and I would say that's probably the time frame on the science end.
Well, Professor Caplan, I would. So I'm an optimist. I think it's important that Americans, or in general, humans in general, should
what did you say? You were lonely?
No, not lonely. Optimist. Optimist.
I'm an optimist. What I meant.
Maybe I'm a lonely optimist.
A lonely optimist.
And that's okay. I'll be a lonely optimist. But the truth is, Professor, is that we have to have hope, right? We have to have hope that things are going to get better, because things are really bad right now. And so my belief, I will say this: I think the President Donald Trump is very unpopular, historically popular. I believe that history is going to be very clear about his role in.
I agree with you there.
Destroying our.
And by the way, I think his health is slipping.
And I think yes, and I also and we'll get to that in a moment. And I think history is also going to be very clear that this was a dark time in our history. And this was not a good time for me.
And by the way, another thing history shows you, every time from the Black Death on to the present day, there's been a pandemic that affected the world. We've had a dark ages period.
Yeah. And so unfortunately, so we're going through demagoguery. It also doesn't help, I think, Professor, that our mediums of communication, which were never perfect, right, have been essentially co-opted by people who are hostile to the public square. And I think that the challenge is that how do you so there's all this signal, right? You're Professor, you wrote these beautiful white papers I just read. I'm reading, and others are doing very positive things. The challenge, though, is how does that break through all the noise? And right now, unfortunately, because of how we organize information in terms of our collective public square, which is in the hands of the likes of Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, and others, I think is a real limitation. However, I also am optimistic that I think Americans recognize that they're not getting the full story, and that regardless of what is being told to them, they live their lived experience daily, and they know that wage that they're getting does not go as far as it did years ago, doesn't go as far 5 years ago, and that's something that cannot be explained away. If you see the gas price goes up $1 in 90 days, that's real life, right? And so Americans, again, 70% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. 70%. So if 70% of Americans are essentially experiencing a tax increase because of gas prices, right? And they're in tax increases because of these sort of really thoughtless tariffs that are just destroying global commerce. Eventually, over 2 years from the 2024 election, let's just say, until November, people will experience that. And you see that in the polls. So in general, I'm optimistic. However, I don't think the signal's going to get all the way through. And I think, unfortunately, we're probably going to be going through a period of transition. A lot of this is sort of transitioning away from an analog world to a digital world. And there's going to be a lot of chaos with that, right? I think that's going to be the story of this century, is how we're going from the story of sort of fixed brick and mortar to this sort of cloud, right? And that's going to be the story of this century, I believe. And the question is going to be, what is the role of humans, right? What's going to happen for us, right? I'm an NYU grad. Imagine there's a lot of kids graduating from NYU who are very concerned about jobs, for instance. We talked about that before with AI. What's going to happen to young people? They spend $100,000 a year to go to a private university. They graduate, maybe they graduate top of their class, but they can't find a job that even helps them pay for the interest on the student loans, right? So that we have a civilizational challenges here that are not going to, unfortunately, be fixed in one election cycle. These are really going to take probably constitutional amendments and long-term change. So I'm an optimist. I'm a guarded optimist. At the same time, in order to get the better future we want.
So let me give you better. I'm going to give you 3 ideas. Practical. They won't get us an instant reversal of know-nothingism and dark age outlooks. 1, we have to call out the ethics. The ethics that drive selfish greed is not appropriate. The person who's probably doing the best job at that right now is the Pope. And I never thought the Pope would be my ally. I'm not particularly religious, but I think his messaging is sound. And you need to establish that a communitarian ethic is where we're going to have to be if we're going to go forward.
Can you say that again, that word, and what it means?
Communitarian. Meaning caring for one another as groups, as a society. You don't really have patriotism without communitarian ethics. You don't really have even something as basic as a neighborhood without communitarian ethics. Can't all be me. Can't all be I know best. It can't all be the tech bro. There'll be 12 of us and we'll go to Mars and start all over again with our brainiest contributions. So we got to fix the ethics. I think that's important.
So that's one.
That's one. Second, I think we should be taxing and limiting AI so that wherever it goes, it has to pay for jobs, retraining, new jobs. I don't care if it's taxed so that it provides unemployment. Tax it. It shouldn't be getting away with this unregulated, nobody ought to tell us what to do. It's going to slow down innovation. Baloney. It's not going to slow down innovation. The pots of money out there are so huge that they're going to proceed anyway. And they could afford to tax the billionaires, as the New York mayor sometimes says.
And Professor Kaplan, just to point too, as well, is we have a consumer economy. How are people going to consume if they don't have a job to pay?
Yeah, they can't. And so, that industry, which is removing jobs, or
Yeah,
threatens to at any event, although I see they're cutting their own workforces internally
yeah,
significantly, ought to be paying the price for the transition that we're talking about, which is inevitable.
which
Third,
is inevitable. We're the whole world's going through it.
yeah,
Yeah,
everybody is and will. And it's not all terrible, but it has costs and they have to be covered. Last point, act locally. For all the talk that we're doing about, mass media and who controls Twitter X and who's in charge of the Washington Post and, CBS and on and on. You get the messages across most effectively, I think, at the high school assembly, at the school board, at the library, at the 4-H club, at the Boy Scouts. You are able to talk to people one on one, and they see that you're not some egghead in an ivory tower. You communicate enthusiasm as well as the science. That's important. And so I think science in particular in the ivory tower has been up there too long. It's got to come out, got to get in the community, got to start, and I would say this across the board, politics and everything else. You win these fights not just in the national battles that some of us pay attention to, but you win them locally. When I see MAGA being most effective is grabbing the school board and banning the books.
yeah. And that really that last piece there really ties to the first piece, the community piece.
Yes.
That if you're not actively involved, other people will be who might have
Yes.
interests opposing yours and not be
Yes.
positive for everyone.
And they know it and they go there. They know that's the weak point and they take advantage. Us eggheads don't always want to run out to the local church or make a presentation to the elders in the nursing home, but that's where you win these fights too. I mean, in addition, I'm not saying there's nothing national, but both.
Professor Kaplan, you're an ethics professor, so maybe let's talk about some ethics here, and talk about U.S. aid, and the destruction of U.S. aid, by Elon Musk, Doge, but really this was done under the legal imprimatur of the Trump administration, so he's legally responsible for what happened here, at least, or morally responsible. What happened when we stop funding AIDS treatment in Africa? And again, I'm tying this to the communitarian piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're basically, I think your argument is that selfishness has really hurt this country.
Yes.
And let's apply that to this situation, because people say, okay, well, how does helping someone who's sick in Africa help me in California, help me in Texas?
The future markets, consumers are going to include Africa and South America. You want to spend small sums of money showing that you care about these people and take their current plights seriously. No, not every place in Africa is equivalent. There are, countries that are going to be buying more, and there are some that are really still disadvantaged and need help. But I think favoring our allies, our friends, and building relationships. So the Chinese get this. They're over there building roads, setting up clinics, doing
And
whatever
it's not
they
charity.
can. No, it's not charity.
Yes.
It's an investment. And if you don't like the inherent value and correctness of helping others at minimal cost with cures that you've got, you don't even have to invent them. So that's a pretty strong moral duty. But if you don't like that, then go to the economics. It's to your advantage to do this. That's, if you looked at Europe, the US, Japan, they're all aging. Young people all over Africa, all over
India.
South America and India. So where do you think the next generation of consumers are? So I could rattle on about this, but I think that's the number one, it's the right thing to do. Number two, it's the prudent thing to do.
And, Professor Kaplan, recently, the Intellectualist, we did an article on how the Trump administration Reporting indicates that the Trump administration is basically saying, if you want access to HIV medication, I believe it was HIV medication, you have to give us access to your minerals.
Yes. Yes.
Can you speak to that at an ethical level, please, Professor Caplan?
Well, it's never nice to extort.
Yeah.
So I don't usually see doctors who say, give me the deed to your house, and then we'll talk about whether you
get some
medical
help.
diagnosis. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it may seem some days that is what the healthcare system looks like, but it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And we're extorting. That is not the way to gain friendly access to the kinds of data and information we want.
Yeah.
And there are plenty of reasons to think that the people that we're trying to get access to their genetic information, epidemiology, whatever we want, would trade with us. I mean, that's the basis of American economic activity, is to trade. So why we're just one-way extortion, all of a sudden, that's bullying, and nobody likes it.
And that probably speaks to who it's coming from.
Yes, our chief bully.
Yeah, yeah, and because it's a very ugly thing to do. What do you, Professor Caplan? As we're coming to the end of this interview, where do you see an opportunity, particularly for people in the sciences, scientific communication, to really help add value in terms of science education, in terms of policy making, really being more approachable, more available to the public? Where do you see that?
Well, I'll tell you something ironic. The key step to getting people to contribute expertise to policy, or to get out more into the neighborhood or the community, is to reward that behavior in their career.
Yeah.
So I've been around a long time, sat in a lot of promotions committees. You know how often anybody mentions outside activity, writing op-eds, talking in the community as a reason to promote you? Well, it's a number between 0 and a very large negative number. I mean, never happens. So change the reward system. It's part of the obligation. You get funded by the public, you have an obligation to go out and talk to the public. Secondly, teach people how to do it. They don't know. The people are wed to a lab bench or peering into a CAT scanner all day. They need some help on communication. And they don't have to be communicators like, Barack Obama or Abraham Lincoln, but at least one coherent talk a year by all scientists somewhere would be grand. That would really make a difference, a big difference. There are a lot of people who would reach a lot of folks that way. The other thing I would say is make allies. Make allies. People who are veterans rely on hospitals because they earned their eligibility through injury and service. They don't want to see those things torn down. They're natural allies. Go to the unions and try to work with them so that maybe you could present at a union event, or the union member could come and talk about jobs and what that means if they shut down a lab or two at your school, to the community. We need allies. You can't just do it by yourself. And there are some natural allies out there to work with, even use numbers of high school and junior high school teachers. Don't be afraid to go with them.
Professor Caplan, I try to end on an optimistic note with my interviews. And what do you tell young people, high school students, let's say college juniors, seniors, people who want to be doctors, want to get their master's in science, and they're worried? There's AI, there's President Trump, there's all these concerns. Would you encourage young people to study the sciences today and to go forward in those careers?
I still would. And what I would say is this: study the sciences. Don't give up the idea of being a doctor, a nurse, a social worker, somebody who does physical therapy, and so on. There's always a market for this. Always. I mean, whatever's happening, there'll be something.
Yeah.
The science, I think what you might need to do is shift your career thinking a little bit. It used to be you get your PhD, you work in an academic lab, and then maybe you get started on the faculty track. What I would say is maybe you're going to work for an industry for a couple of years. learn how they operate, see what they do. One of the weirdest phenomena in this anti-science world we're in is some of our best friends pro-science are industry.
Yeah.
Industry, evil pharma, dangerous biotech, but they don't want the FDA dismantled. They want to sell credible products. They're not for alternative medicine or taking rattlesnake venom or ivermectin or
Right.
something.
Right.
So use that interest. There may be jobs there that you didn't consider, but you'll learn a lot by spending some time in those sectors. Then you'll probably make yourself more effective if you want to pursue a research career because you'll know how people translate knowledge to actual, if you will, products.
So you're still optimistic. You're still saying if you want to study sciences, go for it, but also be realistic
Yeah.
about the role of industry and the role of government and how all these different pieces interact. Professor Caplan, is there anything you're working on that you'd like to share with us in terms of writing or books or anything else that?
Oh, so I'll tell you what I'm working on that I think is of interest that is a little bit neglected. People are all wound up about AI and all wound up about, computer power. And we do hear a lot about genetics, mRNA, we discussed quite a bit. But there's one area that's moving fast, sort of under the radar a little bit, and that's brain science.
Okay.
If you think about where it's most likely in the next 20 years, we're going to see some major breakthrough. I think it is directly modifying the brain with a implant or some kind of stimulator or some type of connection literally to a computer, a physical connection. That could mean a lot for people with disability, could mean a lot for curing many, many brain conditions. Genetics is exciting, but the road from a gene to a disease is pretty long. There are a lot of steps. The
Yeah.
road from your brain to your behavior is a lot shorter. And
Yeah.
we're learning a lot about the brain. So that's an area I might think about. Good to get into, something that needs to be watched, something to pay regulatory attention to as well. People want to know where's my genetic information. I'd kind of like to know where's my brain scan. Who's got that?
Right. Right. And that's going to be the new IP, right? Is
Yeah,
that you're going to
yeah,
have people basically able to download your
yeah.
neurological, how you
Your
engage them.
map. Yes.
Yeah. That's very scary. But it's also, I think, probably realistic given
But
where
look, for those of you who can never learn languages, the right stimulator may make that much easier. So it's not all bad.
Professor Kaplan, if I may, just one last question. You because you briefly mentioned the president, and I bring this up because the president's health is a matter of public importance, right? He's the
Yes.
president of the United States. Based on your academic career, your history, do you think the White House is being direct with the American people about the health of the president? And this is just based on your understanding. And are they leveling with the American people about the health of the president of the United States? Because he's talking quite a bit about. I want to say he's talked about MRIs. He's said multiple MRIs, and I've spoken to doctors who said that's not typical.
Yeah, you don't do that unless you're
Yeah.
monitoring for something.
Can you speak to that maybe just a little bit?
So the answer is no. It's the shortest answer I've been able to give through the whole interview. They're not leveling. They're BSing us. They tell us only what they want us to know, and they wrap it around the idea that everybody has a right to medical privacy, which is true, except I would argue we should waive that for presidents, vice presidents, and probably cabinet members, maybe even members of Congress.
Because of the implications are so catastrophic.
Yes, they control too many important decisions. But when you have a president who can't stay awake, whose gait is walking around looks wobbly, whose legs are swollen, who's got some kind of thing going on in his hand,
Yeah.
that if that isn't an IV going in there for something, I don't know what it is. Got many sleep problems at night. He's manically tweeting crazy stuff at night, and he's 80. So
And if
this
this
is,
was your grandfather,
yeah,
you'd be scared. You'd be concerned.
I'd say this guy needs to be sure we're monitoring him not every 6 months. How about like once a month?
Yeah, yeah. Well, Professor Caplan, it's an honor to have you on today, and really to discuss this and kind of, go through all these really, I want to say, all these different areas and hear your insights. So, Professor Kaplan, I'd love to have you back on the show to discuss these things and to go into
Sure.
further
By the
detail.
way, the one thing we demonstrated today, Brian, was sometimes people think ethics is a little bit abstract and dull. It isn't.
No,
It's
it's
actually
every day.
practical, useful every day. It drives our policies, drives our politics. So if you want a career, I don't think bioethics or medical ethics is going anywhere.
Well, we'll leave with that. Professor Kaplan, again, it was an honor to have you here with History of the President, which is co-produced with Intellectualists and Lincoln Square. Once again, we'd love to have you back on and look forward to speaking again, Professor.
Thank you.